He smiled, held my hand, and said, "Only 3 days left." In that exact second, I realized I was about to lose everything, unless I did something unthinkable. Welcome to Betty's Magical Stories, a place where emotions come alive, secrets unfold, and every story carries a deeper meaning. Get comfortable, open your heart, and let tonight's story take you somewhere unforgettable.
He held my hand tightly, the kind of grip that feels reassuring on the surface, but heavy underneath, like something unspoken pressing into your skin. His smile was calm, almost gentle, and then he said it in a low, confident voice. "Only 3 days to go." For a moment, the world around us felt frozen. People were moving, cars were passing, life was continuing exactly as normal, but inside me, something cracked. That smile wasn't excitement, it wasn't love, it was certainty.
And in that instant, I understood something I had been trying not to see for months. Everyone around us thought this was a perfect ending to a long journey. Friends congratulated us. Family smiled proudly. Social media was full of supportive comments and heart emojis. From the outside, it looked like a story that was wrapping up neatly, the kind people like to celebrate. But stories don't always end when people think they do. Sometimes the most important part happens quietly, right before everything changes. For a long time, I told myself I was just overthinking, that the uneasiness I felt was stress, nerves, maybe fear of change. Big moments do that to people, or so I kept telling myself. But there were signs, small ones at first, a sentence here, a look there, little moments where his words didn't quite match his actions, where affection felt more like control wrapped in kindness. He was charming. Everyone said so. The kind of person who knew exactly what to say and when to say it. He could make a room laugh, make people trust him instantly. And when he talked about the future, he spoke as if it were already written, already owned. Our future, my future. Everything planned and boxed neatly under his vision. I was part of it, of course, but more like a role than a partner. 3 days. That's what he said. 3 days until everything was finalized, official, irreversible. 3 days until applause, photos, celebrations. And in that one sentence, I realized he wasn't talking about us. He was talking about winning, about possession, about the moment where nothing could be questioned anymore. I smiled back at him because that's what was expected, because people were watching, because I had spent so long being the version of myself that made everything look fine. But inside, my mind was racing. Memories replayed themselves rapidly, scenes I had ignored or explained away suddenly lining up with uncomfortable clarity. The time he dismissed my concerns as overreacting, the way decisions were made without truly asking me, how my independence slowly became something he joked about, then something he discouraged, then something he subtly punished. None of it dramatic enough to cause a scene, none of it obvious enough for others to warn me, just enough to keep me questioning myself instead of him. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the quiet, realizing how loud my thoughts had become. I imagined the next 3 days playing out exactly as planned. I imagined myself smiling through it, pushing down that voice telling me something was wrong. I imagined the years after that. And for the first time, I allowed myself to ask a question I had been avoiding. What if this feeling never goes away? People talk a lot about big red flags, about clear moments where everything falls apart. But real life is messier. Sometimes the danger isn't a sudden explosion. It's a slow tightening, a future that gets smaller while pretending to grow. And I realized that if I ignored this moment, if I let those 3 days pass without action, I would be choosing silence over myself. The next morning, the news was full of stories about decisions, deadlines, power shifts, and consequences. It struck me how often people talk about regret after the fact. How many interviews begin with, "I knew something was wrong, but..." That sentence haunted me. I didn't want to be the person saying it years later, explaining why I stayed when I should have acted. So I started preparing quietly, not dramatically, not impulsively, carefully. I reviewed documents, messages, timelines. I reached out to one person I trusted completely, someone who had always listened without judgment. Saying the words out loud felt terrifying, but also grounding. Once spoken, the truth had weight. It was no longer just a feeling. It was a reality I had to respond to. That evening, he repeated it again, almost playfully. "Just one more day after tomorrow." He looked pleased, satisfied, and in his eyes I saw not partnership, but ownership. That was the moment I knew there was no turning back from my decision. The unthinkable thing people talk about later wasn't dramatic shouting or public collapse. It was a quiet, firm refusal to continue a path that no longer felt safe. It was choosing uncertainty over a future that felt predetermined by someone else's expectations. It was understanding that disappointing others is sometimes the price of protecting yourself. In the days that followed, the silence felt strange. No countdowns, no plans, just space. And in that space, I began to breathe again. Slowly, I started recognizing myself, the version that laughs freely, that makes choices without fear of disappointing someone else, that doesn't need permission to exist fully. What happened next didn't stop everything in the dramatic sense people expect. The world kept turning, but it stopped something far more important, a future built on imbalance, on quiet fear disguised as love. And sometimes stopping the wrong future is the bravest headline no one ever sees. Looking back, that smile and those words, "Only 3 days to go," were never a promise. They were a warning. And listening to that warning changed the course of my life, not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. This isn't a story about last-minute decisions for shock value. It's about recognizing moments that test your boundaries and choosing yourself when it matters most. Because the unthinkable thing isn't walking away. The unthinkable thing is staying when your instincts are begging you not to. And if there's one thing I know now, it's this. When someone smiles at certainty that doesn't include your freedom, that's not love. That's a signal. And listening to it can change everything. Thank you for listening to Betty's Magical Stories. If this story touched you, like, share, and subscribe for more magical moments. Until next time, sweet dreams, and remember, every story has magic within it.